container organization as presented in the source data. When applying controlled vocabulary, the agent should, again, use library of Congress subject headings, name authorities, and getting AAT terms. The agent then told to supply that EAD XML formatted in a copyable code window, and for easy transfer here to an XML editor. The EAD Builder agent was successful in generating well-formed code. Got the green box, so I tried encoding single-level and multi-level finding aids, really just out of curiosity. And in any case, I imported 2 samples into a way-off prod instance, and accurately formed resource records and constituent records were generated from archival objects to control values and instances. However, I regularly encountered just a couple of validation errors. These were related to the use of the num element within title statement, as well as some part markup within repository. That was it. Overall, this experiment showed promise, but identified some areas for improvement in the training data. For example, the results highlighted the needs for more carefully crafted EAD training data where identifiers, especially identifiers such as NAF numbers and ref IDs, were removed to avoid hallucination issues in the generated EAD. Overall, the experiment showed promising levels of accuracy in translating unstructured data into ArchivesSpace-ready metadata, and there were some important limitations. So in experiments 1 and 3, as noted, they were unable to fully process longer inventories of input data. The assignment of controlled value terms was encouraging, but required, obviously, manual review. Overall, the results were positive and showed the potential of this approach, but there are still some challenges to overcome, especially when dealing with larger data sets. In conclusion, generative AI is not yet something we would implement as a production tool, but it might soon reliably provide a powerful jumpstart or first crack at parsing documents and expediting metadata tasks. I found that the documentation of inputs and outputs was key for learning, refining models, and working toward consistency with AI-generated content. Future success of this work at Notre Dame will likely hinge on creating shared environments where AI agents learn from a range of team member requests, and where we collaborate on building collective prompt and agent library. Moving away from Gemini and applying the lessons learned to a licensed shareable GTP EDU instance is our next step. So unfortunately, gems are not shareable. So this confounded teamwork on the project, which was largely relegated to discussion and output review. That was the only part we could do collaboratively because we couldn't share the agent. For this reason, GTP EDU agents are shareable, so that's where I'd like to go next. I think we have enough good information coming out of this experiment with a free tool to justify moving out to a licensed paid platform. This Gemini agent project provided a low-hanging solution for supervised learning in the archival context. Large language models are known to be very powerful yet very nebulous tools, and applying agents built for strategic application to define tasks really yielded much more impactful and replicable results. Thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to address any of the topics I've covered in the presentation, or to learn about related projects you might be pursuing. If you'd like to get in touch about this work or anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Anybody has a question? Step up to the mic. I can't believe nobody has a question.
question. I'm curious, sort of, especially kind of where you are right now with this. Do you feel like it's more important to attempt to be generating EAD if you're trying to get this into ArchivesSpace? The reason why I ask is, especially at my institution, we rely very heavily on bulk import by CSV, and just sort of seeing the way that we've been using some of our tooling and working on some of our AI projects in our institution. My concern is creating EAD XML just adds a little bit more of a lift to the complexity of the work. So I'm kind of curious about how you're thinking about this.
So playing around with whether or not it could encode inventories was just really just more of a curiosity. But where it might be a time saver for us would be in zipping up the resource level nodes that are then cut and paste one by one. And so if we moved into, and this would be a whole level of investigation, a GTB instance where we know that it remembers chats and learns from them, not necessarily casing what we've been doing now. But if we could move to a very replicable model to get that resource level EAD, maybe that expedites the data entry. I think that there's utility there, but it would have a long ways to go for that to be an actual production step for us. It's really just an experiment.
Hi there, Jason Strumyanson from UC Davis. Great presentation. I just have a follow-up question, and sorry if I missed it. So when it generates control or subject headings, was it able to provide an authority ID? I wasn't sure if it had a list or if it kind of just found it on its own.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I had it work beautifully once, and then when I checked the sort of resource description document, it was the subject analysis had been done by one of our graduate assistants who included the NAF numbers. And so that was the only time it got the NAF numbers right, was when they were in the source document. It encoded everything beautifully, but if the numbers weren't in the document, it came up with some. And so, in continuing to play with this, I would take all of the training data and wipe every identifier possible because it got pretty creative.
It's pretty interesting. I just want to offer an insight from, I think folks who went to the SAA AI talk. I think someone was talking about using Copilot, and I've been kind of playing around with it. And it kind of did the same thing where it would populate some subject headings, but I was like, can you provide the source? And it'll backtrack. It's like, oh, sorry, actually, that's not a real one, but here's a real one. And it actually provided to a real link. So I just wanted to
yeah. And I was really perplexed to understand how, so the experiment that said, can you give me a text document, it did subject analysis and the headings were accurate, and I don't know where they came from. So it did a very good job of that. So I was curious, is it reading the linked LC link data page? But when I asked it to clean up the numbers, no chance, no.
Thank you.
Out of curiosity, how many of you are using AI at your organization, like Archival Search? That's interesting. Yeah, this was really interesting. I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to ask all of them because I don't know a lot about AI. It's just something that scares me. But it was interesting to see where you have success and where you don't, and you talked about next steps, but in terms of the three experiments that you did, which one do you intend to put your full focus on moving forward?
I think the safest bet and the most utility is probably for parsing documents, where we have any number of collections where there's maybe an inventory at the front of each box, or we have a microfilm series where we have like low-hanging documentation that we could try splitting. And in those cases, you're going to generate an inventory, but you're also going to go to the content and reconcile. So it's sort of a first pass at splitting things up, removes a tedious step, but you're still providing sort of a human-mediated check on the data. And I think that's where this would be most useful to us.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I'm interested when you were conducting your experiments, if you kept track of time and how you found the time compared between setting up all the prompts and using the gems to do this, as opposed to the time it would take for an archivist to do that work manually. Just interested in whether it saved time or you found it was more time or how that worked out for you.
So the first time I tried this, it was that emailed inventory. It was 20 items. I have an artificial collection. Can you make this into a finding aid? And I already had my first, most basic gem established, and I thought, let's, rather than spending the next half hour, whatever, cutting and pasting or doing whatever I had to do, let's just see. And I was just kind of shocked how well it did. But of course, that was something of a very limited extent. And but I think because I already had a little chatbot primed, the first iteration was pretty quick. And then once you establish these gems and you've kind of just dragged and dropped your training data, there's a utility that says, I wanna copy this and make a new gem. And so it was kind of easy to iterate and experiment. Sure.
I'll just keep asking questions. What is AI? So I think, we're here at the ArchivesSpace Member Forum, we're talking about collaborative tools and ways that we can learn from one another. And this is really interesting. And in my head, I'm already thinking about all of the different ways that organizations can benefit from this. And like you said, it's like a capacity issue. When you think about the backlog, even if you could just get a jump start on that inventory and have something that's a little bit easier for the human to read and to work through, I think that's great. What was interesting to me is how dependent it was on your specific institutional use case. You were reliant on what Notre Dame's approved AI are, and you were training it. You have limitations because you're using their free one and maybe a different one would be better. And you're the first person to present an ArchivesSpace Forum about AI, so I'm asking you, but I'm asking everyone. What are ways that, how could we as a community do something like this, right? If we're wholly dependent on an individual organization's AI, you're training your AI and you have it approved at your individual institution, is there a way or a path forward where there is some sort of tool that we can all use and we're not sharing our sensitive data with one another, but is there some sort of broader tool that could be developed that could just help with certain validations and that sort of parsing that we discussed? And again, I'm asking you because you're up there, but this is a question for everyone because, it is, at the University of Notre Dame, that may be, it was a heavy lift for you, and so then you think about other institutions who don't even have the same level of capacity. So that's a question.
So some of the conduits for those types of conversations at our institutions, within the libraries, we have an AI-related listserv where we, and across all of the types of activities that happen in the library, people are discussing how they're using AI. There's a similar situation at the university level. There are regular, our information technology department gives regular sort of lunch and learns, and they have a listserv. So even just a place for conversation rather than tools, I think there could be benefit in kind of just checking the pulse of what other people are doing and keeping in touch. Tools-wise, I'm not sure. We're just trying to figure out how to get a chat environment that we can share among, several team members, let alone more broadly, but it's a really intriguing question.
Yeah, I just want to, as a reminder, ArchivesSpace is here to help facilitate those sorts of conversations. So if there is capacity and interest for that, and obviously we're doing a lot of work sort of in your silo, and I want to make sure that we're like not just amplifying that, but amplifying anywhere else that could be happening and see what we can do. It's cool. But also scary.
Thanks for the presentation, Jennifer. Dan Michelson, Smith College, Special Collections. So I was wondering if you had put, obviously you're in a very early stage, but have you thought about in the terms of whether you would put in findings where you're using this some sort of indication of the use of AI and what sort of, whether you do that for something as simple as the inventory thing or just for something where you're just generating new data?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Where we've had some major migration projects where we've, manipulated data at scale, and we indicate that in the finding aid. I imagine it's very much the same thing. Processing information, revision statement. Definitely want to call out that bulk manipulation and AI was used. Absolutely.
Hi, I wanted to ask, right at the end you had a point about replicating results and reproducibility, and I wanted to ask if you could elaborate on that a little bit more, because I feel like for me that's one of the big challenges I was thinking about in your talk, is like, same prompt, same guidelines, different people running it, totally, how different are the results? How do you troubleshoot that when it happens? So I wanted to hear more about that.
So I think that's, to this point, the iteration kind of focused on how can I get the tool to do what I want? And then and really just using sample data from very discrete, maybe several different finding aids. So it's been very limited. And so I think if we can get a shared environment for the team that's interested in this to work together, I'm curious to know how will the prompts I've crafted act in a new environment? So there's that question of replicability. There's also throwing more a diverse data set at the tool. How will it act then? But yeah, that is a very large question that we'll be looking at next. I did find overall that the more prescriptive I became and sort of using the agent instructions and the prompt, the more I could nail it down to do what I want. And I'm very hopeful that as the tools progress and they remember past chats, we do a better job of remembering the conversations we've had in the past, that would kind of trend toward normalization, but that's really just a hope.
One other thing I thought was really interesting was, all the discussions around how these large language models can be really sycophantic in the way that they communicate with us. And then you said that in the description, it was like more laudatory of the subjects being described. So I think that is like a thing to keep in mind, is, and also like what it is, who it is determining deserves those laudatory comments. And so I think that was really interesting too, that it's like, it is what it is.
Overall, I was kind of surprised because AI can be so effusive that it got as close as it did to the tone you might want in a finding aid and the succinctness you might want in those notes. So I thought that was interesting, but it still did want to be a cheerleader, just a little bit.
You also said that you told it good job. Did you find that having a certain tone with it gave you better results? I that they found better results and they were more threatening to their AI. So I'm just curious.
I always say please and thank you, so when the machines take over. But so in these chats, like a lot of these tools, there's like a thumbs up, thumbs down. And so I would either let it know I did a good job or, hit the thumbs up so that there's at least some feedback about whether we're approaching the desired result.
Well, I also imagine being limited to 10 prompts a day, like, it changed how you were able to interact with it.
Yeah, and that was another reason to be kind of focused and prescriptive about what I was putting in. So that the next time, and I'd have a notice for next time, and then I'd wait my 18 hours or whatever it is to have some more tokens and then try again.
I've got a quick question. I don't have experience creating agents like that before, so could you talk a little bit about the distinction between the agent instructions and the prompt and how those are different and what they're used for?
Yeah. So I think, and I'm by no means an expert, but I think that different chatbots call us different things. Agent, a persona, in Gemini it's a gem, and it's just a little bit of added scripting that says, you're my chatbot, and here's your job, and here's a pile of extra data. So it's trained on these extensive large language, piles and piles of data, but then you have an opportunity to give it some extra domain-specific stuff and say, this is your job. And, for Gemini, that was incredibly easy. It was just cut and paste and drag and drop and no coding. It was very easy to just get started.
Did you have the ability to ask it where it was getting its information from your prescribed data or from this other larger data set? If it ever gave you, so like you said, like you were surprised by some of the ways that they were able to determine if it was your rules or whatever.
Yeah, and I'll briefly say that part of what was confounding was that sometimes my chats would disappear. So I've used other platforms and have chats persist for years. Here they kind of disappeared, but I did have, and I would have loved to have captured this, but I'm sorry. Remind me again.
Could you determine, when it made a decision, could you tell if it was making a decision based on what you provided or something else? Okay,
so one time that I had to parse a document and said, here's the ArchivesSpace loader form, and had instructions about formulating our component unique IDs, and we have a legacy practice where a letter would, in the past, using older systems, a letter would be appended to our component unique ID to indicate the genre type. And so it gave me the sheet, and it gave me that added fourth letter digit for a genre type. And I had like this, the call is coming from inside the building moment, and I asked it, like, how did you do that? How did you make an identifier like we used to do it 20 years ago? I didn't ask you to do that. And it said, well, this is like other finding aids at Notre Dame, and perhaps I had a legacy collection in the training data, but it intuited it, and whether it looked at our website or just told me that, I don't know. But
that's scary because that means all of our previously bad metadata is finding it you don't want it to see.
I don't want to think too hard about that.
Thank you. Any other questions? I know I'm monopolizing that. All right, nobody's standing up, and I'm not going to walk up there since I'm in front of a microphone. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for taking my questions and being game, and I hope that you present on this or something else again, and I didn't just scare you off. We're going to go ahead and take another 15-minute break, and then we'll get going with our last session. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Yeah.